The sport of wrestling is as old as mankind. Throughout the ages, men have competed in this elemental struggle of strength, speed, power, and toughness. The man who dominated the sport for decades at a global level, going on to be named the greatest Greco-Roman wrestler of the 20th century, is Alexander Karelin. Potentially the greatest example of a high DHT individual in the modern world, Karelin was born in the late 60s under the reign of the Soviet Union and began wrestling at the age of 13 in the intense Soviet training program. He would grow to be a 6'3", 286-pound animal of a man who is widely regarded as unbeatable on the mat. Despite his massive size, he had an incredible strength-to-weight ratio. Known for his signature technique dubbed the Karelin lift, he would regularly secure heavyweight opponents in a rear body lock before throwing them over his shoulder and down to the mat with tremendous force. What made him even more of a freak was his agility. He had acrobatic levels of body control, executing handstands and standing backflips with ease, even at his giant stature. His dominance went beyond his strength and agility, though. The sheer force of his presence was enough to put opponents into despair. With the facial structure of an Easter Island stonehead statue, a neck wider than his ears, and the charming temperament of a trained killer, Karelin was terrifying, and the men of his weight class felt it. Karelin took the throne of the super heavyweight division at the 1988 Seoul Olympic Games at only 21 years of age, and it would be 12 years before anyone would hand him a loss. He finished his career with an amazing record of 887 wins and 2 losses, one taking place before his first Olympics, and one at the hands of the most decorated wrestler in U.S. history, Rulon Gardner, in the 2000 Olympic Games in Sydney, Australia. Karelin still took home the silver medal that year. Between the years of 1987 and 2000, Karelin went undefeated, and for 6 of those years consecutively, not a single point was scored against him. He was awarded the Golden Belt, an annual award given to the best wrestler on the planet during that year, 4 separate times, and today is a member of the International Wrestling Hall of Fame. Even during his competitive wrestling career, Karelin was an accomplished student, earning an undergraduate degree in automotive mechanics, a degree in law, and defending a PhD focused on the kinematics of his signature Karelin lift technique. He would go on after his retirement to become a successful Russian politician, being elected to the State Duma representing his home region, and later becoming a senator of the Federation Council, serving on the Committee for International Affairs. At any point in human history, there are only going to be a select few men who meet the stature of an Alexander Karelin. But for the everyday man, what can we be doing to maximize our own potential? What levers can we pull to ensure that our God-given talents are producing all of the fruit that they possibly can? In today's episode of the Hard Men Podcast, join us as we talk about the ultra-masculine androgen, DHT, what it does for you both mentally and physically, and how you can be working to increase your DHT levels. All right, guys, welcome back to the Hard Men Podcast. My name is Tate Taylor. I'm playing host again today with my buddy Ethan Senn.
Hey, Tate.
Welcome to the show.
Happy to be here.
Had you ever heard of Alexander Karelin before today?
I hadn't even heard of DHT before we started talking about this.
He is a perfect example of this particular thing. And I would advise guys, we don't have video yet. Maybe it's something we'll work towards. But if you go look up some pictures and videos of Alexander Karelin wrestling, it seems comic bookish.
I mean, imagine, so I'm 6'2", but he's 6'3" and 286. I mean, that is a massive dude.
And extremely low body fat.
Yeah.
Hardly any body fat, and is literally taking other men larger than him and throwing them through the air.
I think about, talk about doing the sandbag lifts like up to your shoulder. Mm-hmm. So it's like that, like a 250-pound sandbag, but the sandbag doesn't want to go over your shoulder.
Yeah,
it's
fighting against you.
That's incredible.
Yeah, really, really, really impressive. The stats that guy put up, named the wrestler of the 20th century, like the most dominant force in sports, really, during his time competing, but also just like a perfect example of what being high DHT looks like. So definitely go check out some Alexander Karelin highlights. Super, super impressive. Before we completely get rolling here, we just want to thank our Patreon members for all their support. They make this show possible. We're going to be doing some new stuff on the Patreon moving forward. We'll be recording one at the end of this episode today on some of the more granular stuff that you can do to increase your DHT levels. And the show is transitioning a bit, and we're going to call it The Brutal American. So pretty excited about that.
Brutal American on Patreon and in video.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
Cool.
So thanks for the guys out there supporting us on Patreon. And yeah, we'll kind of dive into this. Lots of people haven't heard of DHT. It's not surprising. It's something that's kind of just started to be talked about, sort of in this like biohacking culture community that's growing right now. But I think it's a big one. So we'll kind of talk about just what it is first, and then we'll kind of transition into kind of like what it does, how it's effective, how you can kind of pull the lever of like increasing it, decreasing, that kind of thing. So first, DHT stands for dihydrotestosterone, which is a very, very potent androgen. We're going to use the word androgen a decent amount in this episode. It just means male sex hormone. But androgen, dihydrotestosterone, is derived from testosterone. So DHT plays a vital role in male development and psychology. Pretty much every part of the human organism on the male side is affected by these hormones, DHT being one of the most potent. Basically, DHT is a downstream result of testosterone production. There's a couple different pathways, and we'll get to that here in a second, that DHT is created within the body. But the main one comes from testosterone being converted into a more potent form of itself, basically, which is called DHT. So pretty much anytime you increase testosterone, which we've talked about here before on the Hardman podcast, I think one of the more popular episodes that Eric's done is with John Moody on improving testosterone levels.
Yeah.
So definitely go check that out as well. That's going to have a direct impact on DHT levels. So increasing testosterone should naturally increase DHT.
Is this something where it's a relatively new discovery or new focus, or people like obviously like God made the body this way? How long have people actually been talking about this?
Really not for that long. In a broader concept, I think that for quite some time, people in this very niche kind of biohacking human performance area were probably thinking about this. And it's been known about for some time. I think the thing that's new is realizing how big of an impact that it actually has on the human body. From what I understand, in the the bit of research that we did for this, it is something that it's not particularly easy to find a ton of information on.
Yeah,
and you'll find I think this is one of those kind of like old wives' tales kind of thing, but the thing that it's been associated with for quite some time now is male pattern baldness, which is sort of a misnomer.
Yeah.
In my opinion, from what I've been able to read and find out, DHT is an accelerant. So with that in mind, like if you have a tendency towards male pattern baldness and you have a bunch of inflammation and you're exhibiting it in that particular way, well, DHT is like dumping gasoline on a fire.
Yeah.
But it's not that the thing itself is actually what's causing that. It could just potentially speed it up.
It's just the accelerant.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's other things going on there that are causing negative effects. So yeah, that's DHT. It's roughly, now it depends on what you're measuring for, but DHT is roughly 10 times stronger than testosterone. If you're looking at strength, versus confidence versus, whatever else, what other metric you want to try to measure. There's going to be some variance there on how much of an effect it has, but at its very lowest potency, I think I saw that it's somewhere around 2.5 times as strong as testosterone from a potency standpoint. But the thing about this is that only about 10% on average of your testosterone will generally be converted into DHT. It's interesting that the two androgens actually work together. They contribute to one another. It's just that DHT tends to be a lot more potent. And I think part of this too to remember is that it's actually quite a bit more biologically expensive to make, which is why we just don't create very much of it. Really, really high levels of potency, really, really expensive for the body to make. And so if things aren't in the right ratios, you don't have the right environment, your body's not going to be making this a priority. You could compare it to jet fuel, basically.
Yeah.
If you're just trying to get around town, you're not spending money on jet fuel. So similar thing going on within the body here. The two pathways are what we've talked about already: testosterone converting into DHT. This happens through the 5-alpha reductase enzyme. We won't get too much into the biology stuff, but that's the first pathway. The second one is your body converting DHEA into DHT. A bit more, it's a bit more roundabout, but it is one of kind of the downstream effects of additional DHEA being present in the body, is that you can convert it into DHT. So those are the two biological pathways for the production of DHT.
I know a lot of times we like to measure testosterone, talk about high T, low T. Would it be correct to say somebody could be in a moderate or lower level of overall testosterone, but very efficient in converting it to DHT, and therefore like the results are going to be much better than somebody who's just really high T but low DHT?
Yeah, definitely. Okay. You can have both. You can find guys. I have buddies that I think kind of fit into this category. They go and they get their testosterone checked, and it's in the mid 400s, which is not incredibly high, especially for a guy that's under 30 years old. But you can tell by this guy's intellect, by his physical stature, his strength, facial features, just a lot about him just screams DHT. And so you will have guys that don't necessarily have crazy amounts of testosterone, but they're very good at converting it over into DHT, which is obviously a lot more potent. And so it still carries a lot of weight.
Can you measure DHT the way you do testosterone?
Yes.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Just blood test.
Yeah. I think that you have to ask specifically to find out what your dihydrotestosterone levels are going to be if you want to go do that. But there are avenues for going and doing that, getting it tested and figuring out where it is in relation to your testosterone. And that's one of the good ways, like a good way to do this if you don't want to just kind of go, all right, I'm just going to take some dietary and some training advice and start working on those things. And you actually want to get into the numbers, is go and figure out what that ratio is of testosterone to DHT. And what you'll find is either your test is low and you just need to get your test level up because you're fine at converting it, but you just don't have much raw material to work with. Or you'll find that your test is just fine, but you've got to get better at converting it to DHT, which is a separate set of factors.
And somewhere around 10% is average?
I think that's somewhere around average.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think you can. With stuff like this, there's only so much research on it.
Yeah.
I think that there's probably the potential to have quite a bit higher level of conversion than that. But of course, you could probably drop lower as well. So I think that's somewhere around that kind of median number. One of the things that I do want to talk about, and we'll kind of talk about the different physical and like psychological effects of DHT. But from a larger, like overall perspective, when I was looking through this, and especially the psychological side, I think the physical stuff kind of, when you think of a high T guy, you sort of immediately picture that. High muscle mass, low body fat, commanding presence, that kind of thing. But especially the psychological stuff that we'll get into, I think that one way that we could kind of put this in our little niche is that DHT is basically the gravitas hormone. Like if you want to carry more weight into a room with you, maximizing DHT is a good way to start moving in that direction. Obviously, everything is cyclical, so all of these systems work together. And if you start commanding, more respect and carrying more of a presence with you, then you also respond and produce more DHT.
Yeah.
So things work both ways.
Yeah.
But it's definitely something that makes me just think like, oh, that sounds like just like a guy with a ton of gravitas is what that sounds like. But we're thinking about it more from a biological perspective, which, like you mentioned, like it's not like Adam, I don't think, was thinking about his DHT levels, but I'm sure he was pretty high DHT guy.
Yeah.
Right. So, we did mention that it's kind of biologically expensive. I do want to touch on that again because just because something doesn't kill your testosterone doesn't mean it won't hurt your DHT levels. And so things have to be in a particular state, environment for this to be sort of maximized. But before we get to kind of how to maximize this stuff, what to avoid to keep it from, tanking, we'll kind of talk about some of what it actually does. So from a physical perspective, And there's physical and psychological effects. And I think we'll probably spend more time on the psychological effects because I think they're a bigger deal in my opinion. And I'm super into physical training and I think it's great. I think everybody should be doing it. But I think the psychological effects are the bigger emphasis of this particular hormone. So from a physical perspective, DHT is going to make you leaner, more vascular, harder to carry excess body fat. You've seen people like this probably in your life where like they just kind of do whatever it is they want and they just never gain body fat.
Like eat whatever they want, drink whatever they want, and they just can't put on fat.
They're like that, yeah.
Yeah.
There are some people that are like that are just what we would call like a hard gainer and they're just thin. Mm-hmm. Then there are guys who are monsters who are actually pretty strong and carry a good bit of muscle mass, but they just, for whatever reason, like they're always shredded. I think that's a good sign of high DHT levels. It's just extremely potent in that particular direction. And this is another one of those feedback loops because we'll talk about here in a little bit. Excess body fat is actually something that will increase estrogen conversion and then therefore hurt your DHT conversion. And so the more you go in one direction, the more momentum you get.
Faster you go faster kind of thing. Yeah,
exactly. Obviously, it allows you to carry more muscle mass, build strength faster. One of the big things about DHT when it comes to muscle is muscle density. So we were just talking about this before the show, but I think that currently one of the groups of people that you could sort of look at and see a good example of people being high DHT. Wrestling in general seems to be just full of guys that are like this. It's very one-on-one. It's very singular. You have to have a crazy amount of confidence. And then also the physical demands are really, really high. But especially right now, the guys that are being produced in Dagestan, all the Dagestani wrestlers, if you haven't heard of Dagestan, Khabib Nurmagomedov, one of the UFC champions, really, really thick beard, really pronounced facial features, really strong jawline. We mentioned the fact in the Hulk Cold Open that Alexander Karelin has like an Easter Island Stonehead statue type face. That is one of the main markers of DHT is like really pronounced eyebrow line, really pronounced jawline and cheekbones. And like the bone structure of your face is just a lot more pronounced and aggressive.
I'm picturing like Giga Chad meme.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is.
Like 100% DHT.
Yeah, that's super high DHT type guy. But they're a good example of this right now. Facial hair is another one of the things that's a sign of high DHT. So I don't know if you've never been to Refuge Church, then you don't know what we're talking about, except for the guys here in the basement, I guess. But like the beard games at Refuge are strong.
It's almost a prerequisite. Almost.
There's just a lot of really good beards walking around. Typically a good sign of high DHT is lots of facial hair growth. So those are some of the physical things. Obviously, we could go deeper into all of that. But if you've heard of, like, if you've listened to anything on high T before, you sort of know what we're getting at as far as from a physical standpoint, what some of these hormones are going to do. And obviously, you can flip this on its head. And the other side of the coin is if you're carrying a bunch of excess body fat, if you have a bit of a baby face, if it's hard for you to build muscle mass and strength, some of those things, then obviously you're probably deficient in testosterone, but especially DHT. And so this is something that you could start kind of paying a little bit closer attention to and trying to maximize. And believe it or not, this stuff actually will change you physically, but we'll talk about it here in a second, like psychologically as well. I heard one guy that I was listening to on a podcast, a guy named Hans Amato. I don't think he's a Christian, but really good resource when it comes to this particular stuff. And he does a pretty good job of kind of staying in his lane and talking really just about kind of his biohacking stuff. A lot of this is taken from his Substack, which is there's some really good free content on there if you want to dig more into this. But he used the analogy that if you've ever seen a domesticated pig versus a feral pig, they don't even look like the same creature.
No, it's like a different species. Yeah.
But what's actually happening is that like this will happen in the span of a single lifetime. If you took a domesticated pig and threw it into the wild, it will turn into a feral hog.
Yeah.
And so what's happening is the environment changes, the stressors change, the things that they're doing and having to compete for on a daily basis change. and then all the things that they're surrounded by change, and it literally becomes a different creature. A lot of that is taking place from a hormonal perspective. And so if you went and measured the hormone levels of a feral pig versus a domesticated one, you're going to find very different things. And that stuff plays out, obviously, in this example, in a very massive way.
Yeah, I mean, hair, they get, enormous coats, where most of the domesticated pigs have, almost none or very, very little. They start growing these,
Big cutters.
Big cutters, yeah, which normal pigs just don't.
They just don't have.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting too, because if you've never been around like livestock or ag shows or something like that, you don't realize that pigs are actually super muscular and like carry a crazy amount of muscle.
If we've raised pigs when we were in Mississippi, and they are strong.
Yeah,
they're tough. They're pretty smart. Like trying to get a pig into a stock trailer, take it to the butcher. Like, man, that was some of the hardest. Like, it's
they're
rough.
stubborn. Yeah, they're intelligent. But then you release that thing in the wild, and it retains all of those characteristics, but it suddenly becomes basically a lot more masculine version of itself. Like you said, it grows really thick coats. They actually create these big pads on their shoulders that are basically like really thick skin and fat.
It's like body armor. Like
it is
you're not
very
supposed
similar.
to shoot them there, because like you won't kill them.
You won't kill it. Yeah. They're just really, really tough animals, but it didn't start that way. And so the same thing is possible to a lower level of intensity, obviously, but like a human being can start to lever a lot more strenuous lifestyle and end up a much more resilient, harder target type of person. So that's kind of the physical stuff and kind of a picture of what we're talking about here from a hormonal perspective of what, kind of these hormones do. I think here is where we'll kind of spend a little bit more time, but the psychological side I think is really, really interesting. So first thing is, I think this is probably really relatable to almost any modern person, but increasing DHT can help with your dopamine system regulation. So it makes you a lot less prone to addictive traits in general, but especially related to really cheap dopamine. So dopamine addiction, like endless scrolling, lack of concentration, unable to focus for long periods of time, constantly, without even thinking about it, just sort of pick up your phone and open it and start scrolling stuff that you're not even actually paying attention to.
Close the app, open it back up.
Yeah.
Like you just like mindlessly. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This actually makes you, just because I think it dials the intensity of everything up, it makes you more aware is one of the things that it does, especially of yourself and like what you're doing, how you're posturing, all of that stuff. And so even as small as like using a practical example is like bad etiquette to be invited to someone's house and like them sit down to dinner and like you stare at your phone the whole time, right? Like, but you're not even thinking about the fact that someone might find that off-putting because you're just not very self-aware. And so this is one of those things that will actually raise your self-awareness and make you more aware, like
conscientious.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Of what's going on. And part of the downstream effect of that is that you become less addicted to things like those quick dopamine hits from just finding some stupid funny video. We'll talk about addiction to dopamine more in an upcoming episode. We're going to read Dopamine Nation and then probably do an episode on that.
Yeah.
So we'll get some more into the dopamine stuff soon, but I did want to bring that up just because I think it's so relative.
I assume it works both ways, where if you are addicted and you make an effort to stop doing that, but that's going to help. Or if your DHT is better, then that's going to make you less addicted. Like it probably cuts both ways. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. In almost every single case with stuff like this, these biological processes, it works in a system. And so there are multiple different ways to leverage the system and get it to work better. It's typically not just going to be a single fail-safe kind of crux that you have to fix. It's usually going to be multiple different things in an environment that you have to constantly kind of keep track of. This is a perfect example of that. So another thing that DHT helps with from a psychological standpoint is making you generally calmer and yet more aggressive. It sounds like those things would be the opposite of one another. What I actually found is you sort of have two different archetypes. You have someone who is not calm at all. They're spun up about something all the time. They're always worked up, but they almost never take any kind of aggressive action to solve any of the problems that they're angry about.
Spinning their wheels.
Exactly. Then you have guys that tend to be higher DHT who are much less anxious about all the problems. They tend to get much less frustrated at the drop of a hat, but they're a lot quicker to take action solving problems when they do show up. What they are actually allergic to is letting things fester. And so I think that is a perfect example of like, if you have these two archetypes in your life, one is probably really high in DHT and the other's not. And so that's one of the deciding factors here. It can have a huge impact on this. Your ability to not be stressed about things, but be a lot more decisive when it's time to be.
Yeah.
I think this is super interesting. I don't know if we've talked about this on here before, but our favorite crying father, Jordan Peterson, was on Joe Rogan a long time ago. And he used the verse from the Sermon on the Mount about the meek inheriting the earth.
Yeah.
And he was like, that didn't make any sense to him. And he did some etymology research on like, what is the word there? What's being used? What are we talking about? And he basically came up with what's being communicated is that by meek is those with swords that know how to use them but keep them sheathed will inherit the earth. And when I read this like generally calmer yet more aggressive description, I was like, oh, that's meekness.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we're talking about here, is like has a sword, knows how to use it, keeps it sheathed until that's the very last, resort.
Yeah. And then use it quickly.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting because we, in our modern society tend to read meekness and associate it with weakness. And that's not at all, like, that's absolutely not what that word means.
No. So something that actually can contribute to virtue from a meekness standpoint. Higher levels of DHT tend to make guys less tolerant of nonsense, which I think is hilarious. Because I immediately just pick, like, you're kind of like this. It's like, oh gosh, what did your wife say that day? What is the quote from the detective? Everyone else sees the world.
In Murder on the Orient Express.
Yeah.
Have you seen that movie?
Yes.
He like introduced himself as the world's greatest detective, and he's asked, why do they call you that? He says, I don't see the world as it is. I see it as it should be. Yeah.
So a good example of just like not very tolerant of nonsense. Like, stop that, because we're not supposed to be acting that way.
Yeah.
That's not allowed. And so, like, once again, this relates to that previous one, but like generally calmer, but also when it's time to be aggressive, much more aggressive, to the point, direct,
decisive.
Exactly. So I guess we should probably like define nonsense a little bit, but
yeah, is it like days since our last nonsense? We're like keeping track.
Exactly. They like guys with high DHT have a more sensitive radar for lies, for coercion, for tyranny, for even just for stupidity. Like your meter for what level of stupidity you'll put up with at a given time tends to be quite a bit more sensitive. And they're also typically quicker to respond aggressively to those things. Like they don't mind making other people uncomfortable.
Would an example be 5 minutes ago when we couldn't use the studio because there's a whiteboard in here, and I said, it's a good thing the whiteboard has wheels on it.
That's exactly.
Pick it up.
It's like funny thing about that whiteboard, it has wheels on it, which means it can be moved. It's exactly that kind of thing. It's just like, that's not a good reason.
Some people have a different word for that.
We won't use it here. High DHT individuals tend to have a higher level of agency. They're quicker to take responsibility, and they feel much more in control of themselves rather than constantly feeling pushed around by life. I think this one's really, really good example of something we've talked about already, but this cyclical self-feeding system. The more responsibility you take, the more agency you just decide that you're going to have in your life, the quicker you start producing all of the necessary raw ingredients that you need to be able to actually take that stand. Mm-hmm. And so this is, we'll get into this when we're talking about kind of how to push on these levers and produce more of this in your own life. but the quicker you are to take responsibility, the quicker your body's going to respond and give you the things that you need to take responsibility.
To do it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you go, I'm going to take this weight, the way that God designed you is that suddenly you get better at carrying weight because you decided that you have to.
Yeah. You asked for a stronger back, not a lighter burden. So God gives you a stronger back. Yeah. I think it's like, it probably works the opposite way too, where if you're just like, I'm just getting tossed around by the waves, I'm just here for the ride, like, then you don't need those things. And so, you're going to continue to get taken with the current.
Exactly. This is always one of those descriptors that I think is a good one for good man is, but they're rocks that the waves don't move. And so that's actually a really good sign of high DHT. And if you want to be the kind of man that is a rock that the waves don't move, having higher DHT will contribute to that in a big way. High DHT men care less about every little social or physical repercussion for their thoughts, for their actions, for their words. Basically, that can sound like a negative, I think, in our very feminized, emasculated world.
Yeah.
But what it actually is that it just makes men more comfortable with risk. They're more resilient in stressful situations. And it's also sort of a selfless thing. Which I don't think we typically recognize immediately, but like someone going, yeah, it's okay, I'll take the blame for that, is in many cases like a sign of them loving their neighbors the way that they should. It's like, yeah, I'll say that thing that needs to be said. I will go doing this work that no one else wants to do.
I'm going to have this difficult conversation with my friend because I love him, even though it's going to suck. It's probably going to, not be really fun, but it's necessary.
Exactly.
Like the willingness to step out and be in that awkward and uncomfortable situation.
And so I think a part of that actually is just going, hey, there's going to be repercussions here. I know that there are, but so be it. Like, I'll be fine. Or I won't. It's okay.
Yeah.
Like, either way, it's fine. We don't have to go on a tangent about Paralandra, but we just finished the Space Trilogy not too long ago, the Ransom Trilogy, and spoiler alerts here, so fair warning. But when he finally comes to the realization and conviction that he's just going to have to attack the Unman, he sort of accepts the fact that he's probably just going to die the night before. And then Lewis gets very Calvinistic and starts talking about how basically the thing had always been coming. It was going to happen whether Ransom was there or not, whether Ransom wanted to do it or not. It was going to come to fruition that he was going to attack the Unman and was probably going to die. And I think that is another one of those really practical things that you could point to from like a story mythos perspective and go, oh, there's that thing that we're trying to cultivate. That's high DHT.
But it didn't even stop there. He kind of resolved himself to that, and then he realized, no, actually, I can kill this thing.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's almost like you took the first step, and then he was backfilled with what was necessary to actually accomplish
It's
it.
the feedback loop. Yeah. Exactly what we've been talking about. Like, he didn't expect to win. He expected to immediately be killed, or at least to die with the thing he was going to attack, and instead he ends up coming out on top because he knocked over the first domino and started down the line. So, just care less about social and physical repercussions. Having high DHT and testosterone makes learning new skills and putting in effort feel good. This also contributes to men with high DHT maintaining higher levels of resolve. So I do want to connect these two things together. This is another one of those okay with taking that first step, which tends to be the hardest one for people. Whatever the endeavor is, maybe it's like you're starting a business. Maybe you're just this week, I'm finally going to do it. We're going to start family worship.
Yep.
Even though I'm going to feel like an idiot and my wife is not completely on board yet, we're just going to do it. Like, that first step is typically the hardest one to take. Having higher DHT, having higher T, these things are going to make taking that first step easier. And typically when you take the first step, you figure out that you're not going to die. And so then your ability to have some resolve about continuing.
Stick with it.
Yeah, exactly. Typically that makes you better at just continuing once you've gotten going. So these are all signs of higher DHT. And remember, this is all a feedback loop. So one of the ways that you have higher DHT and increase testosterone levels is to start just doing these things.
Yeah.
This one's really, really interesting too. I'm kind of curious on your take on this one. And we can relate it back to Alexander Karelin because he's very much like this. But higher DHT can also make you more tribal because you're more confident and comfortable with competition and risk, while also being less concerned with social and physical repercussions. You tend to not hesitate to identify and defend and fight for those within your community without concerning yourselves too much with the opinions of outsiders. So all of these things sort of end up leading men to be more family, more community oriented. They tend to identify much more heavily with their people and are fine with having people that are not their people.
Yeah. Do you think it also has to do with an attraction of like if there's a bunch of high DHT guys or say you have one with a bunch of like low T guys, that they're probably not going to be real tribal, but it's going to tend to attract more people who are similarly minded, who have thick skin, who can take feedback, who can care less about the repercussions and things like that, where it's going to not only draw people together, but then build a really robust and thick, community society.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the other aspects here is that competition piece. Typically, when guys are higher DHT, they're competitors. And so competitors tend to like being around other competitors. Otherwise, you have no one to compete with.
Yeah.
And so what ends up happening is that the rising tide raises all the ships, and they stair step one another.
I mean,
they make each other better.
If you're a competitive person, you're used to it. You're used to probably two things, like winning and also losing. Like there's probably not many people that can't relate to both very commonly, like every day. And so you're used to those things, and those aren't muscles haven't atrophied.
Right. Really, really good point. So I think the competition part of this is big. We've seen this like in the gym group here, where one guy, his 1 rep max at whatever goes up, and suddenly everyone else starts working really hard on that lift to try to catch him or pass him, and suddenly all of them get stronger. And you're like, well, yeah, 1 and 1 is 2. So it's just one of those things where I think you can foster this sort of kind of like this high buy-in, high loyalty, high trust tribe. And typically that's going to contribute to all of those men being more masculine because their bodies respond through the requisite materials that are needed to let them keep up and continue to compete. So as you can tell from kind of the physical and the psychological parts of this, the mental part of it, like we said, I think this is in many ways like the gravitas hormone. Like this is the thing that allows guys to carry presence, carry weight into rooms when they walk in, approach situations with confidence, not care too much about every little repercussion and every little naysayer that's going to come along. They tend to be harder to coerce, especially from like a politically correct standpoint. They just don't really care. And so I think this is for sure like the gravitas hormone. Would you have anything that you would want to add to that?
Well, I just think it's really interesting because I think before this conversation, I would have thought of gravitas as something, I mean, not physiological, not intercellular or molecular, or, am I eating right or sleeping right or working out? Like it's more of almost something where before this conversation, I would have thought like you can take a master's level course on gravitas and do better, and that's probably true because they're all connected. Like we're not Gnostic, but I would have not put 2 and 2 together and thought you work on this and then it comes out without even anybody training you, or like this is how you speak, or this is how you carry yourself, or this is how you respond to this situation. But it can working both ways is super interesting.
Yeah. I think this is a really important thing for us as Christians to sort of understand and take into account, is that like actually God designed all of these systems to work the way that they do. And when we do some of the stuff that we're about to talk about that kind of kills and inhibits DHT production conversion, we're actually fighting against the way that God made the world, which is just a stupid thing to do. And then also you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. And so like you become a lesser version of yourself because you're fighting against the design that God's put in place. And so I think taking that stuff into account from a theological perspective is actually important. This is not some side tangent thing that's separate from your Christian walk.
No, it's on the level of I have a gas burner, I put diesel in it. Like that's not what it was made for. It's not going to run well that way. Like that analogy is simplistic, but that's what we're talking about, right?
Yeah, men are not designed to not act like men.
Yeah.
Men are supposed to act like men. Like sex piety is a good thing.
Yeah.
So we'll move on here and talk about some things that actually inhibit DHT production conversion. We mentioned earlier, but I just want to reiterate, DHT is biologically expensive. It's an expensive androgen for your body to produce. So when the body doesn't have the right material, environment, and stressors, DHT is naturally going to decline. If you're deficient in energy, nutrients, thyroid health, and all these systems work together, gut biome, your DHT is not going to reach its full capacity and potential. And so kind of maximizing those things and at least being aware of them is important.
And when you say stressors, you're talking about positive stressors, right? Like you need to be in an environment where your body needs this. Otherwise, why would it give you the jet fuel if you're not flying?
Yeah, correct. So it's funny, like you say positive, but I think a lot of other people would think of them as negative stressors.
Yeah.
Like things that actually compress you, like that push on you really hard. Those are actually good stressors.
Yeah, whether it's like in the gym or out out hunting and rocking around, or like even I would imagine even like a boardroom environment that's like very high stress where you're like making decisions, or like whether you're negotiating on a car sale or applying to jobs and doing a bunch of interviews, or those difficult situations where sometimes in our world you have to manufacture them or this stuff will atrophy.
Yeah, for sure. And it does go both ways. Like for sure there's the very like feral, raw, like physical side of things where it's like, all right, just go run up a mountain or go pick up a heavy rock or something. But then there is really the psychological side of it is like, you need to be in some form of conflict every now and then. Like you need to have to look someone in the eyes and defend your case, or you need to be like pursuing the next level up in whatever it is you're doing. And if you are just constantly in this bubble of comfort, these things are not going to produce themselves in your body, and so therefore you don't get the downstream effects of them because you don't need them, and your body knows that you don't need them.
Right.
So yeah, absolutely. So here's some things that will kind of inhibit, that will shut down DHT conversion and will allow you to not reach your full potential as far as this particular androgen goes. The first one on there is bad sleep. I've listened to quite a bit of stuff on sleep. Personally, this is not something that I've ever struggled with. And so I have a hard time sort of relating to people, but I know people that just have a really hard time sleeping. They don't get good sleep. They have a hard time falling asleep. They wake up a lot. Oftentimes when they do wake up, they have a really hard time going back to sleep. And so sleep is a huge deal. Some things to kind of mention on bad sleep is like get in a completely dark room, like get some ambient noise. Make sure that there's not going to be, I don't know, people do stuff like just leave their TV on all night.
All night, yeah.
Things like that are wrecking your sleep. Getting good sleep is legitimately a superpower.
Like dehydrated, so you get up because you're thirsty. You're overhydrated, so you get up so you pee. Like, walking that line.
Yeah, exactly.
Even I've been sleeping really good lately, but the other night I had like a drink late before I went to bed. And one drink, and I slept horribly, and I haven't changed anything else. And that was like one thing. Like, man, that sucks.
Yeah, and it doesn't just affect you that night; it's going to affect the entire next day. It could, like, one bad night of sleep could wreck you for 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, it ripples, right? Because you the next night you're like or all day you're exhausted, so you go to bed earlier. You take a nap, and now you can't go to sleep at your normal time where you should be because you've slept too much during the day. Like it's horrible.
Yeah. Good sleep is, I've heard a sleep scientist say this, like if you could put into a pill form the biological effects of sleep for your body, it would be the number one selling medication on the planet.
100%.
It's not even close. Like nothing even comes close to being as like healing and regenerative and like healthy for you as good sleep.
Do you track your sleep?
I have done stuff before where I track my sleep. I had one of the Whoop straps for a couple years that I wore that track sleep. But in all honesty,
it's just so good where you're like
it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Yeah.
I lay down and start twitching and I'm unconscious almost immediately.
Yeah. My watch tracks it, and I look at it from time to time to see what's interesting. And it's showing me my average is about 7 hours, but it tells me I need 8 hours and 20 minutes is what my body actually needs. And I think we've been tricked into like thinking, oh, you're in your late 20s, early 30s, you only need 6 hours, 7 hours of sleep. And like it's actually significantly more, than that.
Yeah. Yeah, good sleep is a big deal. Getting enough sleep is a big deal. Making sure that you're getting into REM sleep, so like deep sleep, is a big deal. But that is the number one thing, is like get better sleep. The next one that's on here is interesting because we've talked about the tendency for people in America to overeat, but being calorie deficient is one of the other things that will crush your DHT levels. So if you don't have a surplus of good nutrients, you cannot produce this really biologically expensive hormone. You have to have the requisite calories in place in order to produce stuff like this, particularly carbohydrates, which is interesting. So we're not talking about sugar here.
Right.
We're not talking about like, I don't know, Hershey's chocolate or something.
Complex carbs.
We're talking about good, healthy rice, sweet potatoes, that kind of thing.
It seems like so excess body fat hurts DHT. Also, being calorie deficient hurts DHT. So, if you were in that situation, would you run a calorie deficient diet to get back to like where you probably ought to be before you start to try to turn that back on?
Yeah, definitely. I think the thing to do for sure is to get back into a state where you could have a high VO2 max.
Okay. So
to put it simply, and for that to be the case, you're going to have lower body fat. You're going to have a decent amount of muscle tissue, and it's going to have to be normal for you to move quite a bit. And so I think that's one of those, like, if there's one metric that you were going to try to, or maybe two, it would be increase strength and increase VO2 max.
Is there a number or a percentage, or when you say a high, like what is the target for that?
The last time I checked mine, I have a smartwatch that I'll use for running. I want to say mine on there was somewhere around 45, but I don't know how it's coming up with that.
I don't know what that number means. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it gives you from bad to excellent or whatever, but
right.
what does it mean?
I think anything over 42 is pretty good. But, you're dealing with algorithms and stuff inside an app and inside a smartwatch when you're trying to figure something out like that. I would say like above 40, above 42, you're doing pretty good. But it's one of those things where like if you're never moving, like if you're never doing any sort of strenuous activity, you're not going to have any idea what your VO2 max is. But to your point, yeah, I would say the biggest thing there is cutting body fat, improving muscle mass, and then getting to a point where you can be in a slight calorie surplus and not be the end of the world, that not be contributing to a larger problem.
Yeah.
Once again, we're walking this balance beam here. Long fasted workouts and prolonged cardio are actually negative for DHT production. So we've just talked about the fact that you can't have excess body fat. And a lot of the people that hear that are like, oh, I should probably start running more, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with that. And he's talking, like, when we talk about long fasted workouts, we're talking about 2 hours plus.
Okay.
Right. Like if you're spending 90 minutes plus more than once a week on some sort of cardio machine or out for a run, unless you're training for some really particular event and you're an athlete, there's really no reason you should be doing that. If you're just the everyday guy, dude, lift some weights. It is going to be much better for you from almost every perspective.
Targeting like an hour.
Yeah, 45 minutes to an hour.
Minutes, yeah. But you also look at any of the guys that run marathons, triathlons, things like that. Like they're not built like the wrestler in the cold.
No, they're not built like Alexander Krillin.
And so, depending on what you're going for, they're not going to be high DHT.
Which is funny too, because he was known. He had all these nicknames: the Russian Bear, the Experiment.
He probably was a Soviet experiment.
It's pretty wild. His parents are both like less than 5'6". Like his mom and his dad both were small people, and at like 13 years of age, he was 6 foot plus, over 200 pounds, and just a monster. But if you look at that guy, you don't go, oh, he's a cardio machine. Like he's carrying around a crazy amount of muscle mass, but his cardio was nuts.
Was incredible, yeah.
Really, really good. Like really long, like tough workouts, really high levels of stress put on his body. So there's ways of doing kind of all of these things at the same time that allow you to increase muscle mass, increase strength, and then also keep body fat to a minimum. The next one that we'll kind of talk about here is that excess body fat thing. Basically what it does is increases DHT deactivation and improves your estrogen conversion, which is something we're trying to avoid, right? Mm-hmm. So excess body fat is not just sitting there, I think is the biggest message. It's not just that you're carrying around this benign thing that doesn't have any impact on you. It actually is having a lot of biological impact on the rest of your body. Sure. It's communicating with your muscles. It's communicating with your brain. Like your body is in this constant state of communication with itself. And when you plug in 20 plus pounds of excess body fat, it's having an effect on the rest of the system.
So besides like looking in the mirror, is BMI the best way to kind of look at this in terms of where you ought to be, or is there a better metric for it? Or is it kind of like, got out of the shower and I should run more? Like,
I think most people probably have a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
I am not a fan of the BMI system. Pretty much any dude that's carrying around a decent amount of muscle tissue is going to be seen as, on the verge of obese, based off their height and weight in the BMI system. I would be more concerned with like body fat percentage. Okay. If you want to go look for a number, go figure out what your body fat percentage is. And we'll talk about this in the Patreon, what the specific numbers are, but somewhere around 15% body fat is really solid for a guy. Some guys will naturally sit leaner. Some guys will naturally sit a little bit and hold a little bit more body fat. Just depends on your genetics. But somewhere in that neighborhood of like 12 to 15% is really, really good.
And how do you test it? How do you know what your number is?
There are multiple ways to do it. Lots of places have these like in-body scanners now, or you can even buy your own like at-home scale that will give you, it's not going to be perfect, but a pretty good rough estimate of what your current body fat is. I think that going and getting it done electronically is kind of the way to do it. You could go to someone and have it done with calipers as well. Which people have been doing forever. That's a good way to do it. But I think probably the quickest, easiest way to do it would be to go see if there's a supplement store or a gym or something like that in your area that has one of these in-body scanners. You just go stand on it barefoot and hold these little handles, and basically it sends electronic signals through the body and measures the resistance of getting those signals back. So the next one is going to kind of have to do with medication. This is something I think people in our community, a little bit more on the crunchy side of things, trying to move back towards more natural food and that kind of stuff. Cleaning ingredients, everything. They're probably more aware of this, but for those that aren't, like particularly antibiotics and SSRIs, but even down to things like ibuprofen and acne medication, anything antifungal is going to have a really big impact on your hormone production. Some of these things go from different directions. So like SSRIs are going to directly mess with the chemicals in your brain, which are obviously very, very plugged into this hormone system. Other stuff like antibiotics are going to basically wreck your gut health. And many people say like particularly the lining of the gut is basically your second brain. So once again, you have this feedback loop. Your brain is communicating to your stomach is communicating to your brain and to everything else. And so when you throw in this foreign substance that sort of is almost like throwing a bomb in the middle of there and kills a bunch of that gut microbiome, it can have massive bad effects.
Ibuprofen for the gut health as well? Or Are there any anti-inflammatories that if you had to take one would be better? Is acetaminophen better?
Aspirin. Aspirin is probably going to be the way to go when it comes to some sort of anti-inflammatory medication. From the research that I've seen, particularly when it comes to DHT levels, which means that you could probably assume that it's going to be good for any hormonal system. Aspirin. So the next one, we've already kind of talked about this a little bit, but poor gut health. Antibiotic medication and things like ibuprofen can ruin your gut health. Gut microbiome is essential for hormone production. So prioritizing gut health in general is vital for health overall, but especially hormone levels. It's called the ENS, enteric nervous system. It's the thing that we were just talking about that's lining your digestive tract, that controls everything from digestion to hormone production. It can affect your mood. It can affect your sleep. It can affect a bunch of this other stuff, body fat percentage, whether or not you're in a calorie deficient or calorie surplus state. A lot of that stuff can be majorly affected by your gut health. So maximizing gut health is really, really important here. Also related to this, the one food that this guy that I read a bunch of his stuff, he was like, he never eats soy. Soy in particular is really bad for DHT conversion. So especially soy protein. He said even at levels that don't cause negative effects on testosterone will crush your DHT conversion.
Interesting.
It's very interesting because you wouldn't notice any difference if you were just going and getting your test levels checked. But this much more potent version of that androgen DHT is being completely eliminated because of soy protein consumption. So something to think about.
I think that one's really common that people have almost entirely cut out as far as as far as you know.
Yeah. The one thing that I heard him talk about that was kind of funny, he's like, dude, I love soy sauce. He's like, and I want to put soy sauce on everything. But he uses it like, he's like, it's a treat now. Like it's like a very rare thing for him to use soy sauce.
That's funny.
on food. So anyways, the next one, the final one that we'll talk about is interesting because it can kind of go either way. But if you're gluten sensitive, wheat can have big negative effects on your DHT. If you're not gluten sensitive and wheat doesn't bother you at all, then you're probably fine. But something to keep in mind, there's so many people that have found out like in recent years that they have celiac disease. I think some of that actually has to do with the kind of bread that you're eating.
Sure.
If you're eating super ultra processed bread, it probably is other stuff that you're responding to, but there are genuinely people that have celiac. So
Sure.
If you're super sensitive to gluten, that's going to have really negative effects on your DHT. It's going to
destroy your gut.
Exactly.
The same way.
Yep. Once again, gut health is huge. So that's kind of some of the stuff to avoid, watch out for when it comes to DHT levels. We'll kind of move into things that you can do to improve DHT levels. We've already talked about this a little bit, but managing stress while in high stress environments is one of the big ones. So competition, doing things that scare you a little bit, they're great for improving DHT and testosterone levels naturally. So I think the message there is like find manageable struggles to engage in, find competition, play mind games with yourself. I think this is maybe one that guys don't think about very often. Some guys are really good at gamifying everything and others aren't. But this is something that's really kind of simple from a mental perspective, like a mindset shift that you can start doing is like everything is a competition. There is nothing that's outside of the realm of competition for you as a man. Literally everything is a competition.
So even when we go out, play golf with 4 guys and we play like a 2-on-2 scramble, it's competition. Not super, stressful in terms of physicality, it's not, but just that competition. Like I've got my teammate, we're trying to beat this other team. Every putt is like a really big deal. Like that, just even that kind of like made up stressor on something that doesn't probably matter. There's probably not that much money on the game. Like it's good.
Yeah, exactly. And I think even taking it like a step beyond that, like you're not just competing against the other scramble team. You're competing with the guy who's on your team to figure out whose shots are going to use more often.
Yeah, who's carrying this team.
Exactly. Yeah. Like everything is a competition. Like who's better at driving the cart? Like everything. And I think there's the instances like that where you have a very obvious like opponent and you're trying to win this game. But I think the more important thing that probably happens more often is that you're gamifying things with yourself. You're trying to compete with yourself on stuff. Like how consistent can I be on these daily tasks that I have? How how much better have I gotten in the last 6 months at the stuff that I am trying to get better at? And so you're constantly gamifying. Like, all right, I wonder if I can get this done before 2 p.m. today. I know the deadline's 4, but if I can get this done and do a good job before 2, then that gives me 2 hours to do the next thing that I want to work on. Right? Like that kind of thing where you're gamifying everything with yourself is just a constantly putting yourself in the situation where you need these high T, DHT type hormones to do well. And so once you're like get into the rhythm of constantly putting yourself in that situation, your body's going to respond and go, you need more of this. Here's the stuff you need. So I think we even add that in the notes. Like your body produces the things that you need. So force it to need more masculine traits. Like if your hands never get dirty, probably not a good thing.
Yeah.
We could go off on a tangent about that. I think like lots of people have gardens around here, even though we live in a city.
Yeah.
Like lots of people have gardens and chickens and like they have animals.
You see my backyard, tiny.
Yeah.
And we have, chickens, and my wife has a garden, and she, my kids are out there helping her pull weeds and pick vegetables and stuff like that. But yeah, Saturday we spent most of the day killing, 100 of Colby's chickens and processing them and just stuff like that where you get some dirt or blood on your hands and outside in the sun. Yeah.
Sunlight's huge. Vitamin D. One of the other things that I actually didn't put in the notes, but I think is actually worth mentioning is that anytime you're out and you're actually like literally just touch grass, like that thing is true. One of the most like anti-inflammatory things that you could do is just touch the ground. It's the entire earth has an electromagnetic charge. And one of the things you're designed to do is interact with it on a regular basis. And it actually is good for you, not just from like this, like, I don't know, woo woo, like mental, like spiritual, whatever perspective, but like actually biologically it is good for you. Yeah. To remove excess unused electrons from your body by just touching the dirt. Right. So, one of the big things is like inflammation being really high is going to be hard for you to produce DHT, lower inflammation. One of the ways you can do that is just walking outside and putting your feet in the grass.
Other inflammatory things to avoid, like excess alcohol would do that, right?
Excess alcohol. I think probably the biggest one is processed sugar.
Okay.
Processed sugar is probably the most common and highly inflammatory thing that people do. Particularly like sugary drinks, Cokes, Dr. Peppers, that kind of thing. Extremely high in sugar. You don't really realize it because you're not eating a solid substance and you have no idea how much sugar you just dumped in your mouth. It's crazy. And extremely inflammatory. From a training perspective, so like workouts, training for strength and power is going to be your best friend when it comes to like maximizing hormone potential. So train heavy and train explosively. I think sprints, max height jumps, things like Olympic lifting, powerlifting, things that like, I don't know, the way that I describe this is every now and then I leave the gym and my teeth hurt because I've just been like literally trying that hard not to die underneath a bunch of weight on a barbell or something that like it hurt me. And I'm not just gonna be sore tomorrow. Like when I leave there, I feel like a rag that's been wrung out.
When you say train heavy, obviously like everyone's a little bit different. What like less than 10 reps, 8 reps, like what like whatever you can do for 8?
Yeah. I think it depends on where you're at in this whole thing. If you're at the very beginning of kind of a lifting journey, you probably do need to be doing higher rep sets just to develop the mental mind muscle connection. That higher rep sets help with that. I think that if you're, at any training age over like 6 months, man, I really like sets of 3s and sets of 5s. I think that like you could probably just stick with sets of 5s for the rest of your life and be just fine and continue to make a lot of progress towards strength, towards power.
5x5s.
5x5s are great. I mean, we'll do stuff sometimes where it's not really super planned, but basically we're just going to work up to a heavy set of 5. Maybe that takes us 6 sets. Maybe it takes us 10. But we're not in a huge rush to find that top set of 5. We're starting at, 135, and we're just going to add 20 pounds until we can't do a set of 5 anymore. So I think that that's a really good way of like training for strength, but you're also getting quite a bit of volume in there. You get to practice the technique of whatever lift you're doing a lot. And one thing that I do want to work on that hasn't been present in my personal, training for a while has been really explosive stuff. Obviously, growing up, playing football, baseball, other sports, like speed, power, really quick reaction time, all of that stuff was constantly being trained. But since that point in my life, having stopped playing organized sports, it's sort of faded. And I've either done really long endurance stuff or I've done really like heavy strength based stuff. And I think one of the places where I could potentially improve is doing more explosive training.
We need to get like a sled at the gym and just have guys hitting the sled on Saturday morning.
I actually have a sled.
Do you really?
At the house, yeah. I just need to bring it up there. But yeah, that's a perfect example of like sled sprints, tire flips, power cleans, jumps, that kind of thing. That's going to be great for hormone production. So that's kind of that from the training perspective. From an eating perspective, we've talked about this already, but you need to be in a calorie surplus. And the biggest thing here is it can't just be macronutrients. So it can't just be carbs, fats, and protein. It's got to be more of the micronutrient driven stuff. So this means that you need to be eating foods that are higher in micronutrients. So we've talked about this before on the Hard Man podcast, but red meat is great for this. Particularly game meat is really good for this. Organ meat's great for it. Wild caught fish, and then eggs and dairy.
And probably where are you getting it from, right? Like the reason why a Costco steak and a steak from Joel Salatin are not the same thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just where is it coming from? Because you're going to pay more for the higher quality thing, but it's going to be worth its weight in gold in terms of the nutrients it has.
Yeah. Sourcing food, making sure that you're getting a good mix of really whole, natural, well-sourced food is going to be great for gut health and then therefore hormone production. One of the things that we've been doing a lot more recently is creatine. So as far as maximizing DHT and testosterone, creatine is really good for this. Some other stuff that you can take is pre and probiotics. So if you know that you have issues with gut health, grab a pre or a probiotic or both and start implementing those. And I think it would go a long ways. It's not going to be something that you like take and then feel immediately like pre-workout or something like that. But
how do you know if you've got an issue where you need to take a pre or probiotic, like a gut health issue?
This is, I don't know how explicit we want to get here, but bowel movements are a big sign. Like, how normal are things? Like, is this always something that is a major ordeal? Do you constantly throughout the day feel bloated? Do you struggle with these massive swings between like not being super stuffed to being unbelievably hungry?
Yeah.
A lot of those things are signs of gut health.
Okay.
Good or bad.
What, as far as creatine goes, what's the recommended kind of dosage right now on that?
It's kind of interesting. Forever, the dosage has been 5 grams a day. Just consistently. You could do it during your workouts, or you could just wake up and do it first thing in the morning, whenever. Doesn't really matter. Here recently, creatine's gotten, it's always been the most popular supplement in the world, but it's gotten even more attention, and people are like mega dosing it and going like 20 plus grams a day, which is pretty wild.
At once or throughout the day?
Throughout the day.
Yeah.
And that's where we're kind of finding, like in different studies, they're showing that it actually is really, really good for your brain health.
Yeah. Not just your muscles, but like clarity of mind and clear thinking.
Yeah, I actually have a Mount Athos Performance shaker bottle with electrolytes and creatine in it right now. Like, it's pretty standard. I usually do around 10 grams a day personally.
Okay. Throughout the day or?
Throughout the day, usually. I'll drink one of them in the morning, and I take that Redmond sea salt. It's called Relight. You do this too.
I do too. It's awesome. Since you recommended it, I've been doing it every morning. Like, I'll usually drink it as I'm working out, but like the electrolytes at the beginning of the day is like just the best part of the day. It tastes good, but it just makes you feel great. I don't know how to describe it, but when I miss it, I like physiologically I miss it.
Yeah, they're pretty good. A buddy from back in Texas actually turned me onto those, and we use them all the time. My wife loves them too. So
they're local Redmond Salt company, really really good stuff.
Yep.
And Mount Athos, obviously a sponsor.
Yeah, Mount Athos. We use their creatine. I use the one with the additional minerals in it. I'm a fan. It mixes really well. I can mix it with those electrolytes, and you don't even know it's there. So it's really good. And then we've already talked about this, but I think it kind of is something that we should use to sort of wrap this up, where your social environment has a huge impact on these hormones. So as sort of silly as it sounds, like having a solid church with really masculinely led services that has a positive vision, and then being able to create good friendships within that community is actually going to have a really big impact on all of these biological systems. You tend not to associate them, but they're actually much more intertwined than you're probably thinking about on a daily basis.
Yeah, it's your environment, right? Like just like the hog that gets out and becomes feral, like, the environment that they're in has a huge impact on all this stuff.
Yeah. If the most masculine influences around you are not very masculine, it's one of those things that's not the right kind of stressor that causes your body to go, you've got to step things up here, because everyone is more intimidating than you, and we don't want that. If you're constantly the most masculine person in whatever environment that you're in, it actually is not a good thing for you.
No.
It's so back to Karelin. We used him for the cold open, but he was utterly dominant for over a decade. Didn't lose a match. For 6 years, no one even scored a point on him. But the thing that's interesting is if you go watch anything about him, people kept like, why are you competing as much as you are? Like, there's no reason for you to be putting your reputation and record and all of this stuff on the line at these at these competitions that don't mean anything. And I don't remember exactly what his answer was, but it basically was like, I've got to keep the blade sharp. And like, he didn't allow himself to get complacent, even though he was very clearly the most dominant guy on the planet. He was constantly going and finding ways to get around guys that were going to challenge him and make him work hard. So that environment thing is huge when it comes to hormone production, but also just like the health of your life, period.
Yeah, I think that's really good. Keep the blade sharp, where it may not be somewhere where you need a sharp blade right now, but when the time comes, you're gonna wish it was.
Right, and you can't let it sit there and rust and expect it to be sharp later when you need it. So I'll kind of pose this to you. I've been talking a lot. Why do you think that this matters for us as Christians, kind of in this reform movement?
Well, I think we've started to do this thing where even like Cosmos, like the world's not just stuff. Like we're not Gnostics. We're realizing like we're embodied souls in the world that God made, and God made the world in this certain way. We're figuring this stuff out, and everything works together in just such an important way, and we're starting to kind of recapture some of that that had been lost. Where I think even the Young Restless Reform movement and things like that, it was very heady, very theologically heavy, very very much just thinking toward like, what is the doctrine and what do I believe, but then all these tropes about fat Baptist pastors and different things like that were like, yeah, their theology was great, but like the embodied theology, their how they lived it out, they were like the train went off the tracks at some point. And so I think all this stuff is just super important to really have a healthy family, a healthy lifestyle, a healthy community. It all cuts both ways, and I think that's something we're really working to recapture.
Yeah, that's really good. I think we'll wrap it up there, guys. Really appreciate you guys hanging out. We are going to go into, on the Patreon today, with the Brutal American, we're going to go into 12 different things that you can do to optimize your DHT production and get into the weeds on some of the more specific supplementation, different supplements you can take, food, all of those good things. So we'll work through that here in just a minute. Would love for you guys to join us over on the Patreon. Thank you guys for hanging out. As always, stay frosty, fight the good fight, act like men.